Hi everyone, here's the Book Chemist once again. Today I'm reviewing Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, a writer much like, say, Elena Ferrante, Orhan Pamuk, Philip Roth, Murakami, those writers that I plan on reading basically everything of theirs I can get my hands on, but at the same time I'm not really in a hurry, because I already know I'm going to love that stuff, and I like the idea of having so many reads I can look forward to. I was looking forward to reading Love in the Time of Cholera, and I was not disappointed. I read it in Italian because usually in the last few years I read Latin American writers in the English translation, but then a friend of mine scolded me because he said that I should read the Italian translation. I don't speak Spanish, but I do. I'm a native Italian speaker, because the Italian translation is going to be closer to the original for basic reasons of language. In terms of style, some people find Marquez's style challenging, and he does indeed write very dense prose. His narrated events are told much more than shown, and there are many temporal jumps into the past, back to the present of the story, or shifts from one character's perspective to another. The effect, I'm not sure you can see, but the effect is this block of text that makes up the entire novel. There's very little dialogue. It's one of those books you have to follow closely in order to appreciate. It doesn't really flow very fast, but that's also good, because it gives you the time you need to linger on Marquez's beautiful writing, on his amazing reflections, on the terrible and occasionally beautiful things that happen in the life of his characters, and on his wondrous descriptions of his native land. The book is set in a non-specified city in Colombia, although apparently it's pretty clear that it's Cartagena de Indias, between the 19th and the early 20th century, and you get these amazing descriptions of this city as a place where people lived, the natives of South America lived in the past, then the Spanish came and settled it and built their fortresses and their palaces, but then they left, and now the whole state is in a condition of constant war, and this is a city where people live in conditions of terrible poverty, but at the same time there's a very wealthy class that lives in these wondrous palaces with all sorts of amazing things, and people serving, tending to their every need. The weather is unforgiving, and the conditions of hot, humid weather in here really make you sweat and make you feel the pain of these characters. The occasional storm ruins people's day and sometimes their lives too, but at the same time the natural beauty of the landscape is incredible, and you get these beautiful ruins scattered around the city. There are sunken galleons apparently in the harbor, and occasionally from the at night carnivorous mosquitoes lift from the jungle and swoop over the town. The effect, as I read these descriptions, was the same sense of wonder I get from reading H.P. Lovecraft's most fantastical tales, stuff like the Doom That Came to Sarnath, parts of the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath. The main difference, and the obvious one, is that the places summoned by Lovecraft, these dreamscapes of great wealth and terrible destruction, well, they are made up. They are very literally dream places, dream towns and dream cities, whereas the places described by Marquez really exist in the world. And again, it's not like Marquez ever shies away from describing the misery and the pain of the people living in this place, but there is that sense of wonder that you do get through the book. And I mention this because one of the things you should be aware while reading this book is the distance, of course, the obvious distance between this effect, this sense of wonder summoned by the scenery, and the reality of it all. One of the key ideas discussed by scholars of Latin American literature, Marquez's generation, but not only them, is whether this sense of wonder, these kinds of wondrous descriptions of Latin America as a magical place, more on that in a second, whether they are exploitative whether they are offering kind of a tourist experience to European, American, and Western readers in general. They are presenting this place as an enchanted land, say, which of course Colombia isn't. Colombia and the rest of Latin America, it's made of countries that are just like every other country in the world, or whether instead it's a legitimate way of representing the great natural beauty and the bizarre but wondrous social and architectural dynamics going on in these places. I won't delve much deeper into the topic because I'm in no way an expert on it, but know that there's a debate there, and maybe think about these things as you go about reading either Love in the Time of Cholera or other Marquez's novels, other novels in this so-called magical realist tradition. Marquez is one of the great practitioners of magical realism, although in truth Love in the Time of Cholera isn't really a magical realist novel, at least it didn't seem like one to me. There is a ghost toward the end of the book, but it plays a very marginal role. It's nothing. The kind of magical realism you find in 100 Years of Solitude, for instance, it plays a much more prominent role there. You cannot really imagine that novel without the magical realist elements. So, there are no magical children in here, nobody ascends to the heavens in the middle of the afternoon. What happens in the Love at the Time of Cholera? Love in the Time of Cholera is an exploration of love. It's an encyclopedia of love in its many countless forms and contradictions. It is in a way the story of a very long unrequited love and of probably one of literature's most fascinating love triangles. But at the same time, one of the characters in this love triangle, possibly at least at a superficial reading, the unlucky one, though that's very debatable and I'll talk about that in a second, he has this constant idea, he is lovesick most of his life. He has this idea of writing an encyclopedia of love, stuff lovers can read so that they know how to react to any kind of situation that might come their way, what to do if their love is unrequited, how to write a love letter, all these kinds of things. And in fact, Love in the Time of Cholera kind of is, in a very nice, very postmodern way, kind of is exactly that encyclopedia the character wanted to write all his life. That character is called Florentino Arizza, and he is very much the main character, the protagonist of the novel. We spend much of the time in Love at the Time of Cholera focusing on his suffering, on his endless love for this woman, for this Fermina Daza. But by doing that, by focusing so much on his love, on his feelings of longing for this woman, what happens in the book, I think, is the same kind of, say, trap, it's the same kind of dynamic you encounter in other largely misunderstood books, such as Romeo and Juliet, Great Gatsby. The point of these books is to complicate our collective narrative about love. We think of love as a very straightforward process and feeling, but it really isn't. It's a huge mess, and no one can make heads or tails of it. Say, of course, The Great Gatsby is the story of Gatsby's immense love of Daisy, but at the same time, why can't he simply accept her love as it is? Why does he need her to say that she never really loved her husband? That speaks, of course, more of Gatsby's feelings for himself, of his need to be a successful man and to have everything in life he couldn't have as a young man. It speaks more of that than it speaks of his feelings for Daisy. Same with Romeo and Juliet. Sure, they are possibly history's most famous lovers, but at the same time, the eternal love Romeo feels for this woman, at the beginning of the play, he is ready to swear that same kind of eternal love for a completely different woman. Same with Love in the Time of Cholera. Florentino's love of Fermina is based on basically nothing. He falls in love with her just by seeing her by chance one time he visits her home, and it lasts for decades and decades, and it generates these ridiculously huge love letters. But at the same time, is it really love of the woman? Is it more kind of a romantic quest, an ideal that Florentino creates himself? Also because, for all that he appears to be this kind of heroic romantic figure that waits all his life for the woman he loves. He really isn't, and he does some very hideous things in the course of the books, some really criminal things to other women. Let me know how you read the book, but I think that the novel, for all that it poses as if it's presenting Florentino's story as this epic romantic tale of star-crossed lovers, at the same time it is also very critical of the way he lives his passion for Fermina, and he lives his feelings, and it comments on that very clearly. Also because these sublimated romantic love is compared with Fermina's relationship with her husband, Dr. Urbino, and that is a much more prosaic type of love. It's marital love. They basically spend all their life learning to love each other and to live with each other every day. And it seems to me that the feeling they have, personally, their love for each other feels much more real and much more significant than Florentino's idealized and romantic one. But of course that's my reading, and I'm very keen to hear what you guys thought, and very simply who you guys supported. Were you fans of Dr. Urbino, who also does some hideous shit in the course of the book, make no mistake? Well, Fermina herself is not always a very nice person, let's be clear about that, of course. Or did you support Florentino instead? Eventually, the point of these books, of course, is that they are not just cautionary tales. They're not just telling you you should be wary of romantic love because that doesn't exist. That's not the point. The point is precisely that that kind of love does exist. Gatsby might be a bit of a bastard with Daisy, but he does love her. Romeo might be a bit, I mean, he changes his mind very quick, but he does love Juliet. And for all that Florentino is a bastard throughout the book, he does love Fermina, and I won't lie to you, and I'm not going to spoil anything, but it's not like I was unhappy with the ending. The ending is beautiful in its way. It's that kind of endless contradiction, that way that these books, they bring together apparently contradictory views of the world. Just like life is endless contradiction all the time. That's what makes them so true to life. It's what makes all of these masterpieces of literature. In the end, I think that the book's greatest achievement is represented very beautifully in its title, this association of love with cholera, a terrible disease that killed countless people in this land in Colombia at the time between the 19th, early 20th century, and a disease that is not really a romantic one like consumption, which you find in 19th century novels in Europe. It's not a disease of great passion and lust like syphilis. It's a disease that causes people to die in terrible ways and is associated with the basest things. This is a book that is very explicit about its characters' physical suffering as they live in cramped living conditions, as they embark on terrible trips on steamboats down tropical rivers, as they experience the extremes of tropical climates. It never grosses you out, but it's also explicit in describing the very physical consequences of these things. In the same way, it deals with love not as a sublimated ideal. Sure, it deals with people who think of it that way, but it portrays love in its endless varieties as part of life, as a thing you experience every day in many ways. It talks of love as something that will occasionally make you shit your pants, and still it talks of it as something beautiful. That is no small feat, and even just for its variety of arguments, for the way it brings together entirely contradictory views on life and on love, and for its unforgettable cast of 3 protagonists, Love in the Time of Cholera is very much a masterpiece. What did you think of it? Did you enjoy it? Didn't you? Who were you supporting in the course of the novel as Fermina's eventual lover? Did you think she would have been better off alone? That's also a possibility, of course. Let me know in the comments below. Let's discuss the book. And thank you as always for watching. In a second I'll put links on the screen to some others of my reviews, and bye guys.